this is Rita Bennett, VP Corporate Communications with Great Bear Resources. I'm here today with Chris Taylor, our CEO, and recently, well, today we released some news. How are you, Chris?
I'm doing great, Rita. Nice to see you.
Wonderful. Nice to see you too, and at home again. So today we released some news, and I just wanted to take this opportunity to have you walk through the importance of today's news and then give a little bit of color as to kind of the messaging that we're talking to people about and give people some updates, if you're okay with that. Okay.
Yeah, sure. Like, do you want to just, I put together a few slides. Do you want to go through that?
That would be great.
Okay, so I'll do that. So I'll share my screen here. I guess we should mention that Knox is on vacation too, because it's that time of year.
I'm the new Knox.
So Rita, much appreciated for you dealing with my rambling today.
No, we're happy to do it.
Okay, I'm going to get this little box out of the way, and then I've got just a few slides, but I put our presentation, I put our news release up on the screen in front of me. So, you know, the news release it's important, but it's important for a couple of ways. You know, the first off is that, yes, we've had more excellent drill results from the LP target, which is what we like to see and what people expect to see. But the real surprise is that we're trying to walk people through the beginnings of a pretty comprehensive and important update for the geology on the project. And that's really, the more we drill, the more we understand, and the more we see that the high-grade gold distribution inside of the LP fault is predictable, and we keep hitting it again and again and again, hole after hole, section after section. And why is that? So Bob Singh and the exploration team have been doing a lot of work on this recently, and it's coming together really, really nicely into some new geological modeling. And it's that predictability of the high-grade distribution, which is going to be, I think, a big value driver for the LP fault in the future. But like, just going back over what we put out today, what are the important points? So you can see that we drilled a 140-meter segment of the LP fault, and we ended up getting some very nice mineralization right to the surface. This 80 odd grams over more than 10 meters was right as soon as the drill casing stopped. So basically, as soon as the drill set in bedrock, this was the mineralization that we were seeing. So probably a vertical depth on this of about 30 meters from surface. That's just the depth of the glacial overburden in that area. So it's really right to the surface of the bedrock. I think this, in terms of a gram meter product, is our highest grade, biggest gram meter interval from the LP fault to date. So we'll talk about that a bit, and then we'll talk about the new model. And of course, one of the things that we're doing a lot these days to show the context of the data is these scatter plots. So if you look at the corporate material, the corporate presentation that's sitting online right now, you can see scatter plots of our data, and it's plotted against other deposits which are of interest to us in terms of comparables. So you can see some data plotted up there next to, you know, Agnico's Malartic mine, and you can see the Red Lake gold mine. These are end members on a system that ranges from, say, the Red Lake gold mine on one end, which is a high-grade underground gold mine, and Canadian Malartic, which is Canada's biggest open pit gold mine. And you can see how our data stacks up in comparison. And we even put in the news release today, you can see this is where that you know, 800 gram meter product sits, and we'll go over this in detail. But basically, as I've mentioned before with these types of scatter plots, the closer you are to this upper quadrant, you know, you get the best value. Here you get the worst value. Here you have sort of underground targets. Here you have bulk tonnage targets. So, you know, I'll walk all through that in a second, but this is the point of having this little conversation today.
Awesome. So we're just basically going to go through our results, and then it'll be interesting to see. So this isn't just an update or just an overview of our results. It's also kind of a larger picture explanation of the comparisons that we're having.
Yeah, for sure, Rita. Like, this is a good opportunity to really talk about, I think, some of the important things and where the new modeling work is going to go. So,
great. I think people would really like that. Thanks, Chris.
Yeah, I hope so. No problem. So here we are. This is the LP fault zone. You can see the Dixie Limb, Hinge and Arrow adjacent to that. This is the area that we did that drilling. This is where the cross section is that came out today. We had another drill section which is right beside this, and another one which was over here. And of course, it's all within this multi-kilometer LP fault. But the bottom line is, on this area, you're close to sort of the center of the LP fault system. So we would expect really good grades. And where were those results? Well, they were right here. So you can see there's about 150-meter long undrilled segment that we had in the LP fault. And the drill holes that we talked about today, they're in this area. So we always have trouble conveying just the raw scale of this thing, because, you know, these sort of 150 or 200-meter gaps, these are about the size of some people's gold deposits. So with us, it's just a small undrilled area within, you know, a multi-kilometer system. But the bottom line is, today, the numbers that we're looking at come from right here. So those really high-grade gold results are coming from right here, you know, right basically at bedrock surface right there. What did it look like? We didn't put a really high resolution picture in the news release, but this is what that stuff looked like. I think it came back about 580 grams per ton in the middle of the zone. And you can see it's just absolutely rife with visible gold. This is really cool because in this area, you know, there's about 30 meters of glacial overburden, but as you go along strike, we should be able in places to remove the overburden locally and be able to show this going right to surface. So that's what we're looking around. The geos are in the field and they're looking for spots where basically we can just trench and expose this stuff right at surface. That'll be really neat to see what the zone looks like right there, and also informative because you can see, you know, there's no company in the world that can afford to drill off a deposit this size on, you know, a few meter centers. So being able to expose it and show how it connects together, I think that'll be a really nice plus for us, you know, when we get to that point. But anyway, we're working on it. I would really love to see this exposed at surface, because you can imagine what that outcrop would look like when it's this, you know, hundreds of meters of wide, you know, gold zone with all the alteration, silicification, the disseminated gold mineralization, the high grade gold mineralization. That'll be pretty cool. And these are the numbers that we came out with today, if you look at the table. So the really important thing, again, usually, you know, when you're drilling off a target this size, you don't want to actually collar right in the zone, because that means that the drill hole is missing a good portion of the mineralized zone. I'll show that in a cross section in a second. But once in a while, as you're drilling, you do want to hit it high up. So we did a bunch of holes here just to show people that the gold mineralization really does go right to surface. And, you know, I was talking to some shareholders just a couple of weeks ago, and they said, well, it's too bad the high grade doesn't go to surface. And I said, well, I don't understand what you mean. And they were pointing to the drill sections, and they said, well, we can see that you hit the gold, you know, at 100 meters depth or at, you know, 200 meters depth, but it's too bad it doesn't go right to surface. Well, we're showing you right here, when we put out numbers like this, like if you look at the table there, you know, that gold interval that I was just showing you the chunk from here is right there. You know, so, and you can see when you're looking at this that you've got that high grade gold mineralization going to surface. We had some other shallow drill holes. These are obviously very shallow initial intercepts for this kind of stuff. So that was really the point of this release, is to show that, I should get rid of that, that we do have that high grade material going right to surface in multiple areas. And then here's what it looks like on a cross section.
Just to interrupt, I think you had said something like if you had a few days, you could probably get a garden shovel and shovel that up yourself.
Well, you know, it would take a few days to shovel down through 30 meters of gravel, but you know, if I had the time to do it, that would be a great exercise, and I'm sure I'd be in a lot better shape when I got finished with that.
Okay. I just thought it was a funny kind of comparison, but okay. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, well, Bob and I joke about that all the time, but you know, somehow I don't think it'll be us digging the holes. But you know, if it weren't for COVID, we might be there right now digging those holes. So anyway, so this is a cross section, and it shows those results. And I just wanted to show, like, this is what the actual assay data looks like. You know, and this is that high grade interval. So there you are right there, you get out of the overburden and you're right in that interval. And you can see that, you know, like just about every high grade zone in the world, the highest grades are sort of concentrated in the middle of the zone. Here's a bunch of really high grade intervals. And then of course you have a wide bracket around that of, you know, it's still high grade mineralization, but a mix of grades, and it tapers off towards the side. So this shows you the actual distribution of gold inside of that hole. First time in my life that I've seen, you know, almost 600 gram material that close to surface in my career drilling. But you know, I doubt it'll be the last time we see this with the LP fault, the way things have been going. And then this is these scatter plots, I think might be one of the most informative ways to talk about the project on a go-forward basis. And it's really because you want to see the forest. You don't want to miss the forest for the trees. What I mean by that is that as we put out drill release after drill release, and there's more good gold numbers and more good gold numbers and more good gold numbers. What's the importance of all these good gold numbers that we're coming across? So we put this out at the front of our release. And as I said before, this is the distribution of drill data. This is only the LP fault data. This isn't the Dixie limb. This isn't the hinge. And one of the things that drives me to absolute distraction is when I hear, well, you've got the high grade material at the Dixie limb, you've got the high grade material at the hinge zone, but then you've got this low grade bulk tonnage material at the LP fault. Well, this is only LP fault data. I'll show you in a couple of slides here that this material from the LP fault is comparable in terms of high grade endowment to some major producing high grade gold mines, but it also has this big bulk tonnage character, and that opportunity to have, as you're seeing in this quadrant, this is all bulk tonnage material, this is high grade material, and this is an overlap of high grade and bulk tonnage material. That's pretty incredible. So what I'll show you here going through the data, LP fault, is again, this part of the quadrant is really where people would look like for over, I have to ballpark this, but say over 10 meters width, this is your bulk tonnage, material. Over on this side, above this level here, this is 6 or 7 grams per ton. Remember, it's a log plot going up that axis. So people would generally consider that as high grade. Some people argue that, a few grams per ton gold is high grade, but generally what you'd see is high grade above that level. And so when you're looking at the data here, you can see high grade and bulk tonnage. And what's really interesting when you start to get into this kind of quadrant is the material is both high grade and bulk tonnage, which is really interesting. So if I were in a normal bulk tonnage deposit, I'd be looking at a grade distribution somewhere around here. And I might see on average, if I looked at this, maybe 20 meters of about a gram. That would be typical for a bulk tonnage deposit somewhere in the world. You drill enough of that off, you could build a pit on it. Obviously, you'll have some material, you have material going up to like the 100 meters of a gram range here, and it'll go down to the sub meter interval. But generally, you're going to get a data set which clusters somewhere in there. And I'll show you how that looks like compared to say like Malartic. And then when you're looking at high grade underground deposits like the Red Lake Gold Mine, generally, somewhere around like 2 meters of about 10 grams would be about average for the whole Red Lake area. That's about what they would go for in terms of a target. You can see, you can mine that stuff down to, kilometers of depth because it tends to have really good economics, but a realistic scattering of data within a high grade deposit would be something like this that you see here, probably averaging a couple meters of 10 grams, as much as you can get basically. Sometimes you get really nice material like around an ounce, something like that, up around there. But the bottom line is that would be the distribution for a typical high grade deposit. What really makes the LP fault most interesting to us is that it has all of this. It's just a really rare example of having an excellent high-grade drill interval population and an excellent bulk tonnage interval calculation. In the future, that means, in our minds, and we have to prove it, it's early days, like like I know, early days, we only found this thing a year ago, but as we drill it off and this data population gets more and more dense, I think what you're gonna see is the near surface bulk tonnage mineable deposit with high grade in it, and then below that, going to significant depths, you're going to have a typical high grade deposit extending down below that. That's the target that we're drilling for. That's what we're seeing in the data. That's what's coming together really nicely, and that's, I think, going to be the theme of the project, really that dual character LP fault. And this is why it's hard for, say, the analyst community to really think about this, because it's exceptionally rare to have both of these things together in one space on one project in such a large zone. You just don't see it very often. So it's we'll keep providing the data, we'll keep drilling, but it's that dual character that really makes this such a compelling discovery. So how does it stack up versus some typical deposits, or really good deposits in this case? Well, this is data from Canadian Malartic. So this is Agnico Eagle's big, multi-kilometer long, I think it's about 3.5 kilometers long, open pit, 1.08 gram per ton deposit. So you see those data points in gray. And you can see here, most of the data points in gray that you see are clustering, just like I said they would, in that sort of that point over here on the bottom right of the graph. That's because, again, you have a deposit that averages about a gram per ton. And if you look at this, you can see that you have a data distribution in gray, which is going to center around that mass. And then you can see over here on the left, they're trying to put together an underground mineable resource, but you can see that's 1 meter wide. So from anywhere from about probably 30 centimeters wide to, a couple meters wide, they're trying to build up a population of higher grade material. That's a gram there, that's 10 grams there. There's even some material where they have narrow intervals of, sub-meter or around a meter of even 100 grams rarely, but most of that material that they're putting together is sitting in there in that range. What you can see with the LP fault data or the Dixie data, this is all the Dixie data in the background, is that again, dual character. It definitely has the high grade, which you do not see very much of at Malartic at all. And then it has the same kind of low grade population that you see at Malartic. Again, verifying that our target seems to be right on track, that we have both bulk tonnage and high grade here at the Dixie project. And then here it is against the Red Lake gold mine. You notice the difference in the gray dots between this image and the last image is that the gray dots in the background are the Red Lake gold mine, which is a famous, 25 million ounce high grade producer. And this is data from that mine for the last 10 years. This is what we could get in the publicly available data. But you can see that you have gray dots that are clustered much like ours in this area here. Now I have to mention, we don't report intervals of under half a meter. They do. That's simply choice on our part. If we did, our blue dots, would be stacking up just like this. You can see that in the data distribution that they've got. So we've got a very comparable data set to what the Red Lake gold mine generated for the past 10 years in terms of high grade endowment, but we also have, again, that low grade and moderate grade, even this is high grade actually, and that bulk tonnage component that we have over here. So you can see a very compatible data set with the Red Lake gold mine, and you can see that we also have that bulk tonnage component. So I'm just trying to compare apples to apples. This is the same data. This shows their intervals and their subintervals, our intervals and our subintervals. And what's really interesting, this is the same image, but it separates out the LP fault data in the big blue dots from the hinge and limb and arrow data in the lighter blue dots versus the data that you have from the Red Lake gold mine there in the gray dots. And you can see as you get into the LP fault data occurs over the entire spectrum. Once again, high grade, moderate grades, big bulk tonnage grades, and all that together. But you can see looking at the hinge, limb, and arrow zones, you have a cluster of data, which is more like a conventional, typical high grade thing. You can see some of that data is out here. I should have drawn that circle a little bit more broadly, but you can see that, generally the center of mass of the, hinge, limb, and arrow zones is sitting in there, a few meters, typically of some nice grading material, going to be in the 10 gram. You can see a lot of material there in the, multi-ounce and range, but you're going to have a center of mass somewhere in this area here, which would be typical of a Red Lake high grade underground type deposit. But you see that in the LP fault data, and you see it in the hinge, limb, arrow, and you can see the comparison in the background versus the Red Lake mine. And then we talk about Hemlo a fair bit. So just a couple interesting lines on here. We're still trying to get all of the Hemlo data from the public databases, but the Hemlo open pit grade of about 1.5 grams, you can see how that stacks up there. The underground grade of about 8.5 grams, how that stacks up. And again, their cutoff actually is about 0.3, which I'm just in their open pit cutoff grade is about 0.3, which is somewhere around there, which is another interesting line. But you can see again, looking at the Dixie project data, that our center of mass is a lot more like something like the Hemlo underground grade than it is like the Hemlo open pit. But of course, if you took the subset of our open pit or bulk tonnage type data, you'd have that as well. So again, a nice compatible data set showing that we have clearly high grade underground potential and clearly that bulk tonnage potential. And really, like, Rita, this is actually one of the more interesting slides of the release. And well, when you look at this slide and you're looking in front of you, like, these two things represent two different zones that we're seeing in our drill core, again and again, section over section. And these are really important high grade controls that allow us to predict, like really nicely predict where we're going to hit high grade gold in the drilling. So when you look at the top image here and the bottom image here, Does it really look much different? Well, and this is what's important. Like when I look at it, it's kind of cool. Like you can see there's a lot of veins and vein
Yeah.
remnants and little bits of veins that are left over. You can see them on the screen again and again. There's an interesting area. That's this zone along here. We have it for several hundred meters of strike length. It's open all the way to depth as far as we've drilled so far. And, this thing is wide open to expansion, but it's predictably hosting that high grade mineralization. And it almost looks like this was a Red Lake style high grade gold system that then got totally sheared up and homogenized. Like it got effectively bulldozed within this big shear zone, and that homogenized the grades and made the gold a lot more predictable. And we're seeing that again and again in lots of drill holes. So that's a part of the new modeling work that we're doing. The one below it over here, you really don't see veins at all. So this kind of material that is absent down here. This kind of material that's absent down here. You can see some strung out silicification. This is silica, albite, sulfides, and visible gold. And that is what we hit, that really high grade shallow mineralization. And you can see it's really, really well silicified in this picture with the VG. But that's another parallel zone right beside that. Again, so far we've seen this in drill core for more than a kilometer, I think 1.1, 1.2 kilometers. Hole after hole, and then we're looking at it and seeing this really high grade mineralization, but no veins really. It's all completely homogenized. So usually in a vein type system, when you drill it, you can have a hit and then a miss and then a hit and a miss, especially in the Red Lake area with these deformed veins. Here you're looking at sheet-like planar geometries that are highly predictable, and you can see that the degree of strain in this rock is a lot higher than what anybody expects. And that means that the strain has homogenized the gold and made it a lot more predictable and easy to hit. What that means in the future, which is really important, is when we roll out ultimately the modeling, the geological modeling for the LP fault zone, it's going to be that predictability that lets you eventually put the economics around it. We're not there yet. We don't have enough drilling yet. We know we only found this a year ago. We've only got 126 out of 300 holes that we wanted to do in it in this year done so far. So it's going really, really well, but it is really early days. But when you look at the project long term, being able to predict where the high grade gold is going to come in lets you do better geological modeling, which lets you do better grade prediction. And when you can see consistency of high grade gold and you see it over such a big area between so many drill holes and so many sections going along strike and at depth consistently, that's going to really help the modeling. I think that's the kind of thing that will add a huge amount of value for Great Bear as a company. And this is the kind of work like Bob's done this, many times before in his career for other companies, different clients of his when he was doing consulting work. I've helped him with some of it on some of the deposits doing structural geology and all this. This was before we got busy with Great Bear. So what we're seeing now is an emergence in the data of this predictability of high grade. That's going to be super important for us and the modeling off the project going forward. So anyway, I wanted to cover a few of those basic points, talk about the context of the news release. And I think if anybody has any questions, they should probably give me an email, give you a shout, give Knox a shout, and we're happy to get back with any questions about this stuff.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. I think that was very helpful. There's a lot of people, asking for your insights to these things. So it's nice to actually hear from the horse's mouth. Like Chris said, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us anytime. Our contact information can be found on a slide at the end of this video. Thank you so much.